welcome everybody. I'm super excited for this talk that we're going to have with Richard Enriquez. He is the director of production at Halon Entertainment, and he is also an alum of the Academy of Art University. So we get to have the privilege of talking with him today to hear about his journey in the industry. And we're going to also talk about what all the great stuff that they have going on at Halon and where he thinks the future of production is going to go. It feels like it's so wide open and the technology is just changing and moving so fast that it's such a quick clip that I'm just really excited at all the content that we're creating. So we're going to drop in, or we did. So we put in the Halon website so you guys can take a look at where Richard is, the studio that he's heading up. We also want to put in his IMDb. It's extremely impressive, going all the way back to John Carter and Zero Dark 30, World War Z, and then one of my favorites, The Orville, and of course The Mandalorian. And I get super excited when I see John Wick 4. I'm like losing my mind. So I'm just really, really excited to have Richard here with us. And thank you. So Richard, after we chatted, I was really, you're mainly working in a lot of CG, VFX driven films. That's where you've kind of gone through. But as we were chatting, you actually were at the Academy of Art in the motion picture television department. So I would love to hear your journey of where you started and how it all kind of folded in.
Sure. But first of all, let me just say it's a real pleasure to be here. This event has allowed me to reflect a little bit on my own career. And, sometimes the speed of business it moves so fast, you don't get those kind of those reflective moments. So it's actually been a pleasure already. And to the Academy students out there, good morning. Thank you for having me. Thank you for spending a little bit of your time with me. I'm an Academy alum, as Sasha mentioned. So I have sat where you sit now. I am 13 years on from graduating, and I'm gonna give you a little perspective on where those 13 years took me, how I got there, etc. And do it by stage, and hopefully impart some perspective, some context, and some wisdom that I wish someone would have given me when I was about to walk off the stage at the Academy. I will start by saying that the first 13 years are the most difficult. It is not easy. It is a challenge, but it is the motion picture business. And if you want it, you gotta want it. As Sasha mentioned, I'm currently the director of production at Halon Entertainment. I did not plan for that to happen. I did not plan to get into real-time visual effects, virtual production, etc. It chose me. I rode the wave of opportunities and relationships and timing. And this is where the industry threw me out. That said, it has been a very privileged 13-year run. Previous to being at Halon, I worked in the visual effects department for Sony Pictures Entertainment. I was there during the hack, as a matter of fact. Prior to that, I was an independent coordinator working in visual effects. And prior to that, I was the assistant to producer Colin Wilson for a few shows, some of which Sasha mentioned. But before that, I was an Academy student. And when I graduated at the Academy, I always kind of make the note to myself that at the bottom of the stairwell, no one handed me a 3-picture deal. No one gave me a roadmap. No one gave me a task list as to this is how you go do it. I had a degree in my hand that I was proud of. I was living in San Francisco, which everyone was telling me that I needed to leave and go to LA. And my demo reel, it was great for the spring show, but it wasn't going to go out and win me commercials in the marketplace. So there's a great anecdote that Quentin Tarantino uses that. Before he broke into the industry, if you would have sent in, if you would have mailed something and addressed it the outskirts of Hollywood, he would have received it. That's how I felt when I walked off the stage. I felt like I could not be further from what I wanted to do. And what I wanted to do was, I don't know. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I had studied directing because I wanted to learn everything. But, that was to really just delay making a decision and to really find my path, because I wanted to give every opportunity that came my way. I wanted to take it and see where it would take me. One bit of, and there are going to be a few of these peppered over memory lane here. One bit of recommendation I would give for those of you that are at the precipice of beginning your journey into filmmaking, my word of advice would be like, you're already doing it. You're already in the mix, right? When I came up, for perspective, there were no iPhones yet. I think the iPod 1 had just come out, and we thought it was just the coolest thing that we could use it as a hard drive. That was the geek thing to do at the time. The camera of choice was the Panasonic HVX shooting in 20p. And it was cool because we could record to cards and we didn't have to carry tapes anymore. There was no Facebook yet. There was no Studio X. And I believe the Epidemic Film Festival, I don't know if that still exists, but that happened my semester 1 of my freshman year. So while I came up through the academy, it was certainly, it was a little bit different time technology-wise. As will next year, as will the year after, and the year after that. It's only going to speed up exponentially. But I mentioned that in that it's relationships that you are making now are the fossil fuel of your careers. At that very first Epidemic Film Festival, a guy that I had never met, he made a black and white Charlie Chaplin-esque little film on Super 8. He works for me now. When I was at the academy, we had the guy who ran the camera room. He was super organized. He knew his stuff. He was a great editor. He works for me now. The people that you're rubbing shoulders with in your studio, in classes, in the hallways, those are going to be the fossil fuel of your career. My first break came 6 months in. I wallowed for about 6 months. I got into local theater. I helped people on commercial shoots. I operated third camera on documentaries. I was hustling all gratis. Didn't make a dime for the 6 months. But it was an email blast from a former student to the late, great Curran Angle, who used to teach the portfolio demo reel class at the academy. It was a call for interns for a film called Milk, directed by Gus Van Sant. So I went. They said, what do you want to do? I said, I want to do production because production does everything. They gave me an internship. They gave me 2 4-hour shifts a week. And after the second 4-hour shift, they offered me a job. And they said, do you want to be a production assistant? And I said, yes. I don't know what that is, but yes. My first day in the industry, my first paid day in the industry came about 6 months after I graduated. My first task in the business was to go to James Franco's hotel room and find his lost iPhone. I had not yet held an iPhone. I didn't know how to operate an iPhone. The first one I ever held was James Franco's. It was in the cushions of a chaise lounge. Yes, I looked at the books he was reading at the time, etc. I also had to go fetch his wig that day. That was my very first task. And when I walked in, they said, I need you to go get James Franco's wig. I looked around. I said, is this a hazing? This is a first day hazing? Nobody blinked. And that's the business. Go get James Franco's wig. Yes. Go get James Franco's iPhone. Yes. Go get the dumpsters that have blown halfway down Treasure Island and bring them back against the wind and the rain. Yes. And that's how I broke in. I did 6 or 7 months on milk. I think over the course of the entire calendar, I probably did a bigger span of calendar on milk than anyone, including DPs, production designers, art directors, etc. And I think that is the second takeaway that I wish someone would have told me when I was a student. And that is to make yourself indispensable. Get yourself in the room. Those that rely upon you, make them confident that you can take care of their tasks, solve problems, and make their lives easier. And your phone will always ring. Your phone will always ring. At the end of milk, I was sitting in the craft services lounge, and everyone was gone. The film industry is very nomadic. We call them gypsies. They come into town, they do a magic trick, they fold up their tents, and then they're off to like the next show. But I hadn't experienced that. This was my first show. How do you get to the next show? And I remember that an art director told me, he said, don't worry, you made good relationships here, your phone will ring. Your phone will ring. And then he disappeared. And my phone did ring. My phone rang maybe once or twice a month. I would work maybe 2, 4, 6, maybe 8 days a month on commercials, documentaries, all kinds of different types of crews, driving vans, setting up, what have you, usually in inclement weather and usually at ridiculous times of the day. And this is all physical production. And as you know, from the preface of this, I work in visual effects. I run a visual effects shop now, just to highlight that I did not choose this. I did not choose this. It was more about taking advantage of opportunities and not blinking and trying to be part of a solution. While I was on set for a commercial, this is about a year after I graduated, I got a call, and it was from Pixar. And they said that we are doing a canvas for a feature film that we are doing. It being Pixar, I guessed it was an animated film. And they said, we're looking for the best and brightest to be part of this production team. We hear that you're one of the good PAs. Will you come interview with us? I said, yes, I'll take the very first slot you got. I'm going to set the pace for the rest of those interviews. And I remember hanging up my phone and standing next to another PA who was a veteran, a San Francisco veteran. I said, man, that was Pixar. He said, Pixar? I'll never forget. He turned to me, he said, man, we may not see you back here for like a year. And that was the last time I saw him. I got the gig at Pixar. It ended up being a pretty unique experience in that they were doing their first live action film. At the time, it was called John Carter of Mars. I was hired as the very first production body. So I set up the offices. And when the producer came in, he had just come off a show called Avatar. And he was going to helm this show. And after a couple of weeks, we had hit it off so well that I became his assistant. So after about 18 months in the industry, I was now working for a line producer at the highest level, working with what we call the Golden Quartet over at Pixar. I was working with Andrew Stanton, Mark Andrews, Jim Morris, Lindsay Collins. I work with them every day, was in the room. My pedigree, my CV shouted that I should not have been in there. But the fact that I had become indispensable kept me in the room. And when you're in the room, it's important that you're there to be seen and not heard. But more importantly, to know your bit. Whatever bit that you're responsible for, that's when you want to step up and show that you have your bit clocked. That keeps you in the room. That keeps you as a trusted ally in what is a very, very complicated process. I wholeheartedly believe that everything that we ever see on the little screen, and especially up on the big screen, it is a miracle that it gets there, that it ever gets there. We have a saying at Halon, is like, every project, projects want to fail. They want to run off the tracks. They want to run long. They don't want to render. They want to crash. They don't want to decide on creative. They don't want to decide on a software package. They keep moving their advertising dates. Projects want to fail. And so for a production-minded person, you become that fulcrum that keeps things from failing. After I had been in the industry for a few years, my mom, she didn't really believe that I had a real job. That I think she was more concerned that I would have income every week as opposed to doing what I was doing. And when she asked me, Rich, what is it that you do? We had been on Carter for a couple of years, and Colin took me to Europe, and we did World War Z. So I'm traveling the world, A-list stars, jumping all over the place. My mom asked me, what is it that you do? What do you do? And, I thought about the privileged position I was in and trying to surmise it for her. I said, Mom, I put out fires with my iPhone. It's really my job. People say they need ridiculous things. They call me and I make them unridiculous and real. And that's physical production at that level. As I mentioned, my journey has been rather privileged because I started on big shows. It was dailies with Gus Van Sant and Sean Penn. It's, what do you think about the casting for this, $250 million movie? So being in those rooms with those high creatives, I had Bob Richardson ask me once in an elevator, what did you think of those dailies? And we have these like career development type of tasks that we give each other. Like, if you're stuck in an elevator with someone, what is your 20 word pitch? You just don't reckon it's going to be 9 o'clock in the morning in Soho, in London, just off the high street. And Bob Richardson, in all his mad glory, is going to ask you about his signature phosphorus flare. That's the way the business is. So I jumped from show to show. After I worked in Europe, Double Negative offered me a job in Los Angeles. So I didn't really move to Los Angeles. Los Angeles chose me. It said, we need you here. And I said, yes. And that's kind of how it worked out. I hadn't planned. I knew I was going to come back to San Francisco. I knew it was going to be tough making a physical production living with what were even then ridiculous escalating costs of living in the city. And the industry just said, nope, we need you here. And it spit me out in Los Angeles. That's how I came down south. And from then I worked pretty much primarily in visual effects. I did not train in visual effects. I did not know what the animation pipeline was. The first time I heard the word rigging was out of the mouth of Andrew Stanton. Andrew Stanton, who wrote all the Toy Stories, who was the 6th employee at Pixar, in one of the very first visual effects meetings I was ever in, asked about rigging. And I said, oh my God, I have no idea what he's talking about. But you find your way, right? You find your way. You find your way with relationships, etc. After working in visual effects, I went to Sony Pictures Entertainment, some relationships that I had made on some visual effects shows. I knew the executives because they would ask me in the room, Rich, what do you think? And that is the next takeaway that I'd like to impart you with is, if you're in the room and someone asks you what you think is is 100% unique. And it is imperative that you speak truth to power. Hollywood is built on massive egos. It's also built on the stones of broken visual effects companies that have tried to accommodate massive egos. If you're asked what you think, it is your duty to tell the truth. I famously or infamously, I got a Disney trailer postponed. I had only been in the business for like 18 months. It was because I stood up and I said, you can't go to market with this. essentially, this thing sucks. Pull it back, pull it back. And it did, and it became a little bit of an infamous thing amongst our clique, but that's my job. It's what separates me or separates you from everyone else in the room. So if you get that pitch to hit, make sure that you swing at it. I went to Sony Pictures Entertainment because I wanted a big opportunity. What is life? What is movie making like at a big six studio? I worked for the senior vice president of visual effects. And so everything came through our office, every single movie. I think we handled 14 titles at a time over a 24 month production slate. But to be perfectly honest, it was a little slow for me. I had been on the road. I had been hustling in physical production, which is a much different beast. And when I got to the studio, this massive machine, I got a little wary that I was going to become a house cat, and that the energy that I had to go get more, I was going to lose that. And I thought, this isn't right for me long term. And then the hack happened. About 3 days before Thanksgiving, I guess it was 2015, Sony Pictures Entertainment was hacked. I was amongst the first in Los Angeles to realize it at their desk. And so that was a particular experience. But I do remember that about 24 hours, 48 hours after the hack, we were kind of rendered unable to do anything, dial telephones. We didn't know people's extensions, etc. And it was physical production instinct that said, let's go walk to every office. Let's go get everybody's extension. Let's go publish a phone tree. Because at the studios, every decision, I heard an executive liken it to, every decision at a studio is like trying to turn an aircraft carrier. It has to go through so many levels of approvals and oversight and whatnot that it takes forever for anything to happen. Whereas I was on the road, I worked for the producer. I could go to someone and say, hey, do this now, please. And it would happen. And I still had that energy, but it wasn't going to happen there. Then a good friend of mine, Dan Gregoire, who founded Halon Entertainment. He founded Halon Entertainment in 2003. I had worked with him on John Carter of Mars. I worked with him on World War Z. We had traveled Europe together. Whenever he traveled, he would put up a motion capture volume on site at the studios. I would arrange the cameras. I would, wave the wands. I would, I'd look over his shoulder as they were doing previs. And he said, Rich, how would you like to produce? And I don't know what else came out of his mouth. I just said, yes, let's do that. Whatever you're about to say, let's do that. I'm ready. I left Sony for Halon Entertainment in 2016 to produce game cinematics, as a matter of fact. I didn't know what game cinematics were, but I found out quickly. And since, I ascended to being a production supervisor, overseeing production for the studio, its entire slate. And now as director of production, do a myriad bit of things. Number one is I handle all the shows that we take, all the negotiations with studios, incoming shows, shows that are already in progress, inform their workflows, their staffing, costs, etc. And so in closing, I have no idea how I got here, but there are some hallmarks that I tried to tune myself to over the course of that journey. And number one was being true to myself. If I try to base decisions, and the film industry will give you difficult positions to be in, and decisions therein, because it is so nomadic. you have to you have to make a commitment to it, right? And you have to play it smart, because you will give up part of your existence for some time as you chase this thing, and it can overtake you. I would also suggest, as a bit of words of wisdom, that if you are experiencing fear as you sit in your seats there and you see your structured reality now kind of coming to an end, and you're going to have to forge that next step and the step after that. I would say embrace the fear. That the motion picture business is the motion picture business, and it's not retail. And if you don't have fear in your belly, you're probably doing it wrong. It is a privileged industry to work in. You will meet and come across amazing people, icons, idols, and asterisk, assholes too. And they will all be at a level that is a little distance from reality. I have had a belly full of fear for 13 years. And I guess the morning that I wake up and I don't have that is probably the day I quit. That's a little bit about my journey 13 years on. Sasha, did you want to segue to?
There's a couple of things I want to just, circle back around on this, because I think you really gave a lot of wisdom. And, I think the one big one, is always being resourceful, looking to how do you become indispensable, be resourceful, always be on the lookout, being really smart and being able to figure stuff out is always such a key, no matter what level, if you're in production or you're in pyro or you're, back at the shop, doing the previs, like always being resourceful. Because the thing with movie making, like you said, I love that it is a privilege, and you are going to meet amazing people because it's such a unique and incredible art form, is that we're constantly solving all these problems. So you really have to be in that place where you're moving stuff through, also being ready for opportunities at every step, because that's where you always are moving forward and being able to see all of that. Now, the one I do want to ask you a follow-up question is,
sure,
there's, you have fear, but you have to have no fear to speak the truth, be really clear, being really honest. Because, once you start to get into the white lie or like appeasing an ego or being the nice person on set, that's when I think things go off the track. I mean, I've seen it many times where people have been afraid of a director and it's totally going way off and everyone's afraid to tell him or her. So when you say, like, be there to tell the truth, what kind of mindset and how are you able to speak the truth without, one, becoming an a-hole yourself,
sure,
and then two, but doing it in a way that's really that everyone can kind of listen to, and it doesn't, and people don't get defensive. So I'm curious
right.
about that, because that's a magical skill that I'd love to hear your thoughts on.
That's actually a great question. That's actually something I haven't thought about in a while. And really the bones of, I think, my technique goes back to the academy. And it goes back to the academy in that how you give notes to peers. The way you interact with your fellow creatives, it needs to be constructive, right? You can see the worst string out of cinema ever. But I know that there are three virtuous things in it. I'm not like, maybe it didn't make sense, but it was fast. Maybe it was incoherent, but the music was good. Find the virtue in things before you shoot them down. But when you shoot them down, and that's probably a bad idiom, but it's really about prefacing by appreciation and respect, and then saying, however, this is how I feel, and come with an argument. It's not just about blurting out, I hated it. It's more about like, I get it why this needs to be released now. I think that the tempo is really good. I like the DI, and I like how I felt when I left it. However, I think that we're missing da, 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 da. And this is what it means to me. I think is a good way of structuring that. And, the more I think about it, the more is that's a skill that I learned at the Academy, that you guys are all peers. Everyone, in the worst films you see, there are going to be faults. You guys are amateur burgeoning filmmakers. I'm not going to lie, 98% of the stuff that I saw in school was kind of garbage. But that 2%, is, again, that's fossil fuel. That's a step towards the future. Take that 2%, make it 3, make it 6, make it 12. Find the virtue in things, and don't bother with gilding the lily. If something's good, say it's good, but move on from it and look to build that is lacking.
I can already tell, just even the way that you present, you present in a really calm and effective way. So I'm sure just everybody kind of is like, okay, let's hear what Richard has to say, because you put it in a way where it's not like, that's terrible, why are we doing and I think that I think it's also like the energy that you also are bringing into the room, where if you keep everybody together, and it's like it's a group, it's a group effort. I call it, filmmaking is the most social art form there is. It's all about conversation, and it's all about being open with that, and not blowing smoke too. Like, there's times when you're going to blow the smoke because it's fun, and then there's times when it's not necessary. There's
some battles, right? Not worth waging for
exactly.
For certain. If I'm the odd man out in a 40-person room of 20 Academy Awards, like I'm probably going to go get my car.
Exactly.
But pick your battles for sure, and there are hills to die on, and and
there's the ones that you're just like, oh, not today, sir.
That's this is not the moment.
So, and then the other thing too, I'd love to talk about, and then we'll get into talking about Halon and the shop and where you guys are going. But being in the industry for 20 plus years, you're saying, like, you got to have that kind of that fear, that fire in your belly on the daily, because like you said, this work is grueling.
Yes.
Even being on set, I did that for a while too. We have a very similar path, and that was grueling. And then I found that I actually like being the shop producer. I like being in the plays, and I like working with everybody on the daily inside, out of the rain and the mud. But what is that, because too, you don't want to like make yourself sick. How do you like take care of yourself too, like, psychologically, but also creatively, and energetically, so that you can come into making these films that are at high stakes and still just really being happy and enjoying yourself?
That is a very complex question. And I think that I've dealt with it differently in the different stages of my career. When I was coming up, it's also famous, I had a sleeping bag in my office at Pixar, and it wasn't set deck. When my boss traveled to London, because all our visual effects vendors were there, I slept with my phone in my hand. And sometimes I slept under my desk. That's because I didn't believe that I had the institutional knowledge or ability to have forethought with what my job was, because I didn't have any experience, that I had to hustle more than the other guy, so that when LA woke up, my bit was clocked. If I have those 3 or 4 hours between when Colin would go to sleep in London and LA would wake up and I'd be with Andrew, that the messaging was tight, that was presented in a professional and efficient way. a lot of the motivation in those early years was fear. And fear of, and I don't want to say being afraid. It's a much different thing. Fear for me was, it's how I think I defined adrenaline at the time. I didn't want to let my bosses down because I knew they didn't want to let their bosses down. I think that would be another nugget that I would let, that particularly for the production folks out there, my brethren, in that, just remember, everyone has a boss. And if you can make your boss happy and they can make their boss happy, everything's going to be cool. You keep it in that perspective and just be empathetic that your clients, your artists, your producers, they all have to answer to someone, and they have to answer to someone for metrics, for expectations. Give them that info, provide it for them, make prop up those above you. And I thought that would keep me with access so that I could realize my potential, is really what it was. And whatever levels I could skip on the way, I was going to do it because I wanted to see what I could do. 13 years later, it has brought me to this place, somewhere I would have never imagined. And it's been an amazing journey. But again, it wasn't by plan. And when I was graduating from the academy, I was terrified because I had zero leads. My CV, my resume was all academy projects. I did not have an IMDb. Now someone keeps my IMDb for me. I don't know how that happened. But early on, it was fear of failure. That turned into, I think, when I came off the road, I wanted to have more of a life balance because all my stuff was in storage. My addresses, my mail was getting sent all over the Bay Area. My passport was getting dirty, which I loved. It was getting really dirty, a lot of visas in it. But I didn't know where to call home. I didn't know who my real friends were. I hadn't seen my family. I missed California. And it really became, that was one of my big decisions to go to Sony, was to rebalance myself. I had met a girl. She is now my wife, and I didn't want to travel around the world. I wanted to be near her, and I wanted to build something different because I know, and this is another little tidbit that I will take from you. The motion picture business will take everything out of you if you let it. So there is a point where you have to pump the brakes. Perhaps, maybe you can tack into the red in perpetuity. We all know that isn't true. Everything comes to an end. My energy level at that time when I got to Sony was, I've had it. I've had a taste of it. I've done ridiculous things overseas, and I have my stories. I have that chapter in my book. I want to move on, and I want to refine balance. And what I found at Sony was, it was so polar opposite. People left at 5 o'clock. That blew my mind. People didn't show up till 9:30. That blew my mind. I was the guy that was always first, always last, and hustling. And here I was at one of the big six, and it was what we called banker's hours. And I wasn't ready for that. So even though I had recalibrated myself for more balance, I had turned the dial too much. I was afraid of becoming a house cat. So when Dan came at what was then, Halon was a smaller studio of, say, 30 to 40 people, I said, that is what I want to tackle. That is what I want to conquer. And I want to go realize my potential via that. Now, 6 years on, we're a studio of 150. We are global. We have just been acquired by another company, and we are growing massively. But I still find myself in these moments where, is my dial tuned in right? Am I having lunch? Am I having dinner with my wife? Am I sitting in this chair for too many straight hours in the day? How do I balance myself? How many times do I need to walk around the block to replicate how many, work steps I would put in if I was touring the studio right now? We're in unprecedented times, obviously. But it is, I would say, for those of you that have been challenged by it, you're not alone, because it is challenging. It certainly is. I find sometimes I'm here directing traffic for our shop, and 7 or 8 hours will go by. I'll wake up on a Saturday to tie up loose ends and realize I have no laundry, I have no groceries. I gotta get cat food. It can become all encompassing. I think the very first thing that I would suggest would be awareness. Keep yourself aware. And again, most important thing is adhere to your value structure. What is important to you? What do you hold the most worth in? What do you need to take care of on a daily basis, and revolve your decision-making around that?
That's such great advice. And it shifts. I mean, I think that's the thing too, 100%. That I want everyone to know is, like, when you get out of school, where your priorities are going to be different. And, doing the journeyman lifestyle, working these, having these adventures, that's what the time is for. And then you adjust as you go through your career, and always just keeping that in top mind, and, and enjoying your life too, but also like having this amazing ride of, making all these amazing projects and films that are going to last, and, for a legacy that you're building as well. Even when we're just the one name in the cast of thousands, we're still part of that legacy, which is always so amazing. Well, let's transition. Let's talk about Halon.
Sure.
Let's talk about your shop. I think there's a lot of folks that are very interested in the chat bot about the opportunities, what kind of internships you guys are offering. Of course, with Studio X in our department, we're actually kind of pre-training. So there's we get a lot of people in junior roles as well. But I'd love to hear what you guys are up to and what you're doing in the future.
Sure. So a little context, Halon Entertainment was founded in 2003 by Daniel Gregoire. They came out of Previs, really the modern Previs, the way we know it now, came out of the Star Wars Episode 2 team. They had a team on the 3rd floor at the ranch that was visiting the whole show. And for those that aren't familiar with Previs, it's essentially you're taking creative, whether it's board script, a beat sheet, or just a download from the director, and you're putting it in 3D so that you can visualize it, get it through editorial, and you can plan the most complex of sequences. It's commonly used for action sequences, stunt sequences, but it's used for all types of different applications: previs, postvis, techvis, pitchvis, all part of the visualization package. That began at Lucas Ranch, and that team ended up breaking up and became 4 or 5 of the original previs shops in Hollywood, Halon amongst them. There are 2 that remain. That's Halon and the 3rd floor. 3rd floor is named because the 3rd floor over at Skywalker, Skywalker. It's funny, I haven't said Skywalker in a long time. I once got to do a dub at Skywalker and hear my voice in the Kubrick theater. It was pretty cool. I hadn't thought about that in a long time.
Those are those beautiful moments.
Yeah,
that you're just
I know.
like, was I really there? Was
Yeah,
it
one of
real?
my fears is that I'll forget more than I can remember. Another bit of great advice someone gave me, Rory Ink, who is a location manager legend in the Bay Area, once told me, this is like my year 3 of my career. He said, "You're in a really privileged position. I implore you, keep a journal. Keep a journal. Even if it's 1 or 2 lines a day, because you are going to want to look back on these things." And I'm afraid to admit I may have forgotten more than I remember already at this point. So this is a fun exercise. But back to Halon. Visualization is the bread and butter. Previs, post-viz. We do tech viz, of course, pitch viz, and we also do finals. I think what distinguishes us from other visualization shops is our proficiency in real time. In 2016, the studio, Dan Gregoire, mandated that the shop adopt Unreal Engine as a pivotal part of its pipeline. And so back then, while we were still learning the engine, we were using it as a rendering tool. We first used it on the second Apes with Matt Reeves, and then the third Apes, and have since developed a real-time toolkit, if you will. Previs in real time, HCAM, VCAM. We call it HCAM for Halon Cam. A virtual camera, virtual location scouting, assets for LED walls. But we also do real-time cinematics for video games. We also do pre-rendered cinematics out of Unreal for video games. We have, at any given time, 6 to 10 projects going, usually feature films. We also do episodic content. We do some commercials as well. We also have a 50-person Fortnite team that a standing team that works with Epic that produces their 15-minute splashes. When you buy something on the Fortnite screen, those poses, the lighting, the color, the assets, that's us. When you see a 15-minute Neymar splash, for Fortnite, that's us. That work is very polished and kind of celebrated in the marketplace. We can say, hey, we did this. But the ethos of Previs is behind the scenes. We work with directors very early in development to help bring their visions to the screen. When you watch a big, complicated action sequence, those things do not just happen. They are meticulously put together with camera, with montage, with blocking, animation, and a little bit of magic sometimes.
That's just so much fun too. I mean, I think that's what I love about Halon is that you guys are really you're really creating a lot of content kind of in this new way, doing virtual that you're doing with Unreal, and you're doing the previs and post-viz. Can you give the audience a little bit of a quick thing of what is previs, just what's the difference between previs, post-viz, and tech viz, just really quick, and kind of what kind of skill sets are utilized in there. And then I think once we do that, we'll start asking some questions from the audience.
Sounds good. I just saw a VAD question pop up, so that's really exciting. So I'll get to the previs bit quickly. Previs is really, these are really flexible teams of like 4 or 5. They're generalists, but their strengths need to be camera, cinematic language, structuring a sequence, being able to transfer something from a script or an idea to dope cinema, right? Make that in 4 shots. Give me these 3 beats in 4 shots. Make it connect on that side with that, make it connect on that side with that. Astonish me. Previs is about iteration, it's about exploration, it's about pushing the limits, but also making sure that it can be physically shot on a set with real rigs at real distances and scales safely for stuntmen and talent. Post-viz is when they've already shot, they've come back from principal, and now they're starting editorial, and they're putting their cut together, and they have all this green screen in their cut. They have all these wires, all these temp shots as the final visual effects vendors are working towards final. We come in, and with proxy assets, We do slap comps, we do wire replacements, like green screen replacements, so that the story can get into editorial and can start to inform the pacing, the cut, the shots that they want, the shot development, whether or not they need to take some of those shots to final. Post-viz helps bridge the gap between green screen and final. Tech viz is when you take a technical look at a sequence to ensure safety, to ensure that you can physically pull it off. One of the most common uses of tech viz at the moment is to for people that are shooting on an LED screen. What lens do you shoot at? How high can that thing be? What, how much ceiling do we need? How bright is that screen? How deep do we need to be? How far are people out of focus? Tech viz is something that gets you there on the day, so you have all those questions answered and clocked. Pitch viz is something that we do. It's a little bit of a higher fidelity that we do to polish for filmmakers that are looking to get a green light, or they're looking for that next step. I need to convince this actor of this. Show me him doing this really cool. We have this little bit. I need a 2-minute trailer to go to the studio and say, this is what I want to do. That's pitch viz. And so it really is about, it's almost like you're adopting creatives into the studio. We form a little family of artists, and we make something really cool for one reason or another. And that's pretty much the gist of it.
What I love about it is that you guys for previs and even post-viz and tech viz and pitch viz is that you and your team are really at the forefront of setting down the creative.
That's right.
Which is amazing. I mean, that's why I love looking at previs and then the final shots, because not much has changed.
Right.
And I think
that previs doesn't change very much.
Exactly. And so I think that's really amazing that sounds like such a fun part of the job too, that you really are the ones making the stake.
Yeah, it is. If you're into the creative bit, as opposed to the polished bit, previs is a good spot. You want to show off cameras, you want to build scenes, you want to tell stories, you want to do big action sequences, you want to work with others to put together dope stories. Previs is a good place to try your wares. Yeah,
amazing. So let's get to some questions. We're getting close to our hour. I don't know if you have any, before we kind of get into it, if you can go over maybe 10 or 15 minutes.
Absolutely, sure.
Just so we can get some of these questions answered.
Sure.
Okay, so Will, do you want to start us out?
I do. I'm going to go with this last question first, the one that you saw, Richard, regarding VAD artist modeler opportunities. Would 3D character and creature modelers trained in A&M VFX have to adjust their skills now with the real-time applications, Unreal Engine being used more in the movie industry, or is there training that's offered for those things?
That's a great question. The VAD is probably will be the biggest growing sector of CG, I would imagine, for the next 12 to 18 months at least. There are LED walls going up all over the world. Our group, we just put one up in Atlanta. We have plans for many more, and there's going to need to be talent to get things up on those screens. Now, to get things up on those screens at a fidelity that is understood, at a frame rate that it needs to run at, that's what the professionals do. Will you have to change your current workflow in a non-real-time workflow to accommodate those types of shows? 100%. Is there training for it? 100%. We provide a lot of that training. What we look for when we hire is talent. I think that a lot of those technical skills can be taught. We have a ton of documentation and roadmaps on how to do it. We have a lot of great leadership at the studio that can nurture young talent to be able to do it. We do it every single day. But I think the big takeaway is that is not going away. It is only going to grow here. it's in the middle of that growth. I mean, already look behind us. My VAD is about 40 people deep. It may be 42 or 43 by the time I get back to my inbox. But yes, the training is 100% available. We pride ourselves on being able to do that.
All right. Here's a question from earlier on, but I think this is, so it's a little general, but I think it's pretty cool. As a PA, so thinking back to your PA days, how do you handle a task that seems impossible?
First, you attempt it. First, you attempt it, and I think you'll be surprised what you can pull off. I think one of the, when I was a PA on Milk, it got realized at like 3 or 4 o'clock on an afternoon that, I don't know if you guys have seen Milk, but when they recreated the big candlelight vigil scene downtown, they realized about 3 or 4 o'clock, they're shooting at dusk, that no one had gotten candles. And so frantically, someone, a coordinator or a production supervisor, put all the petty cash that the office had in my hand and said, go buy as many white candles as you possibly can. When I ran out of the office, I had no idea what to do. No idea what to do. And I certainly didn't want Gus to show up on set, Harris Savides, Sean, etc., and not be able to do the scene because there's no candles. But I think we're more resilient than we think we are. My advice would be, you better try, would be to try. And if you can't, go back at the end of that exhaustion and have some alternatives. It can't just be, I couldn't do it. It has to be, that was not possible in the time frame you gave me. I tried this, this, and this, but here's what I come up with. And I think that I found a path forward. You want to solve problems. Nothing is impossible. You will get asked to do the impossible as a PA, 100%. But it's not impossible to those that are tasking it to you, because they've probably been down that same path. So my advice would be attempt and then come up with alternative solutions if you can.
Yeah. I think too, I mean, I know this might, I don't know what your stance is on it, but I know, our PA days and then kind of where we're at is there also is a part of it where if you get that task, is not to the person that's giving you the task, not necessarily ask them to figure it out for you. They're asking you to do the task and go figure it out. That's right. Yourself. That's so right. That's always like a little bit of a mistake as a PA. Like you want to ask, being like, I don't even know where to begin. How do I start that? And the person giving you the task, they have other things to do. They want on. You to, they're moving on. They don't have time to figure it out for you. If they did, they would be doing it.
Yeah.
Especially production wise, like, yes. And so like, talk about that a little bit. Cause I think this is important I'm always trying to say, like, you have to be resourceful. Yeah. When you get a task, you have to do all the things to figure out how to get it done and get it done well, quickly, and completely.
Yeah. I think that's a really good point. When I worked for Colin Wilson, Colin is British. And I hadn't worked with a lot of Brits at that time. And so a lot of idioms, particularly production idioms. For instance, I know what a location scout is, but at that point, I didn't know what a recce was. So he would blurt things out at me in his funny English accent. And I would say, yes, sir. And I would step outside the room and be like, I would go ask other people, what does he mean when he says this? I would go look it up. I would look for antecedents. Show me what it looks like, and I can get there. But show me an example. Do you have something that I can base this task off of? That'll keep you in the room. You're going to need to be resourceful because very little in the film industry is straightforward and codified for success.
Love it. It's such good advice. So I think we have some other questions, Will, definitely about the internships and stuff.
They've been asking about the internships, if there's links or just where they would go to. Are you looking for internships for next year? Things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, copy that. So I think it's worth mentioning, I think over the last calendar year or so, we've been working with Sasha, Becky, Catherine to bring more Academy talent towards Halon. I think we've hired about 10 people over the course of the last year or so. Summer Shit, Brian Chow, Connor Swan, Mark Queen, Elham, Brian Gable is on our production team at the moment. He just wrapped on Aquaman. So there are opportunities, as I mentioned earlier. We merged with Lux Machina, which builds LED screens, and then we're concurrently absorbed by NEP Studios to be the spearhead of their virtual production initiatives. So yes, we are hiring. I would love for it to be a more regular conduit, and I'm sure that over the coming semesters and years, it'll get to that point. But the path is open. We certainly have VAD opportunities open 24/7 a day, 24/7. We also always need animators, whether it's final animation, you want to do polish animation for final game cinematics, you want to work in previs and build sequences and tell stories, and frankly, everything in between. We do a variety of things in the visualization spectrum, so it's not really something, the type of shop where you go and you sit in the same seat for an elongated bit of time. You can jump to different types of projects across different types of IPs, features to games, to cinematics, to what have you, depending on your interests. We like to place per interest because I think that brings out the best work in people. And people, I think it's good that people, they get in uncomfortable situations and use a different part of their melon to keep it active. So we try to work with every individual person that comes into the studio to make sure that they have a focus, that they understand their expectations, that they're getting the training that they need to be an effective team member. Because at the end of the day, I expect our shop to do the absolute best work in the world. So it is very competitive. There are a lot of talented people out there. And one thing that we can always be sure of when we work in this industry is if you look behind you, there are 1,000 people right behind you that want that same spot that you're standing in.
You actually brushed on one of the questions here that is a little more specific, but because you've been talking so much about previs and the different types of previs, they would like to know, how can they stand out if they're trying to go for that type of position? What kind of skills would they need?
I like to see cameras. Show me your camera language. Tell me a story in camera. Show it to me MOS. Show me how you block out a scene. Where do you start a scene? Why are you starting on that lens? Why are you starting in that composition? Why are you showing me this? Why is the camera moving? Why isn't the camera moving? Telling a story, it goes back to Academy of Art day one. You're here to tell stories. And I'm telling you, at the top of the mountain and everywhere in between, it is about stories. If you can tell a story masterly blocked off in a lock-off, I'd say watch 12 Angry Men by Sidney Lumet. You can lock off a camera and move 12 people around a square and it can be dope, but you have to have intent. You have to know the story that you're telling, and that's what I look for. Am I compelled to watch more? The question should always be, what's next? Do they have anything else I can see? That's what I look for when I'm looking at reels, particularly for animators, previs artists as well. Another good bit of skill set is just being a generalist, because you may be called to rig, you may be called to build assets, you may be called to comp. It really is kind of a Swiss Army type knife type of position, but it's always, always, always going to come back to story, and that's going to be your camera work.
I adore that answer. I'm sure you're going to say the same thing, Sasha. We love getting our students more aware and more involved in like film grammar and things like that, to just kind of always have an eye towards that.
And push it. like push it brings something.
Yeah, absolutely. This question is an interesting one. It's from an actor, or maybe one of our acting students from from MPT. This is they're very big fan of game cutscenes and the visuals that come with storytelling. So following up right on what you're talking about, can you explain the similarities between game filmmaking and motion picture filmmaking?
That's a good question. I think what we try to do, because we're seen as a motion picture company, when we were courting Epic to do their Fortnite spots, our strategy was to sell the shop and our proficiency in our cameras, in cinematic storytelling. I think that when we watch game cinematics, particularly in-game cinematics, I watch them and I think, who selected these cameras? And those are oversights. I think that cinema makers are less likely to, try and put this politely, are less likely to slip by the wayside than the cameras that you see in video games. So what we try to do is position ourselves as the kind of holders of a higher language of cinema when it comes to cameras, and sell ourselves as the shop that can bring that to a game IP that maybe could use some more love on the camera side, but also may just want like some Hollywood feel, to a big action sequence. Action is one of the hardest things. They say comedy is the hardest thing to direct, but directing action is the best are masters at it. And if you're not trained, if you don't have a lifetime of training and exposure to it, which I imagine a lot of people sitting in game studios, they may not have physical, practical experience doing these things. I think the difference shows. I don't know if that accurately or acceptably answered that question, but that's what I'm going.
No, I think it's good. I mean, I think at the end of the day, you come to the school, you learn all these different things, but no matter if you're working in cinematics or you're working on, big feature films or TV series, it all comes down to storytelling and using the medium to keep pushing the story forward in every shot, in every composition. All of the things are always moving that forward and really being focused in that part of it. And how does your piece fit into that? How do you propel it forward? I think is always that's what we're always talking about. I mean, it's always, when we're in the rooms, it's always like, what's best for the film? Is this moving the film forward? Is this telling the story forward? It's not about that. Is a dope ass asset in there.
Yeah.
It might be really cool, but if it's not doing anything, it's going to get cut.
Yeah. You gotta kill your baby sometimes.
Yeah, you totally do. Okay. Will, do you have any other questions? Maybe we'll take one more and then we'll wrap it up.
Well, someone wants to know if students can connect with you on LinkedIn. So I thought I'd throw that out there.
Absolutely, 100%. And I think, Sasha, you have it. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll drop it in again for any of you guys that came in late. Any other ones? Will, you feel?
Well, I didn't see a lot of other questions. Some were more general about, demo reels and things, but I have a question actually.
Yes, please.
I'm curious, in all of your different positions, you talked a little bit about kind of when you're earlier on and having to advocate for a position you have or something that you feel strongly about. But in the role you have now, when you're working with even larger studio, you're working with these really big filmmaking studios or game studios, is there ever a situation where you feel like you really want them to strongly represent the project or to move forward, and you have to communicate that to like very powerful people in that situation, and maybe speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, that's that's difficult terrain to navigate. I've had to tell plenty of folks difficult things. I remember being in London, and the DP kept moving this mobile DI system, that truck that we had put together for him, and him moving the locations was complicating dailies, and dailies getting back to LA, and but no one would tell this guy no. And so, it wasn't my job to tell him no. So I went to the person whose job it was to tell him no. And that person was so conflicted that he couldn't tell him no either. Yeah, I would say trust your mentors, and use the chain. Use the chain of command. Don't try and jump too far. Don't try to, overstep. Never overspeak as well. Keep your bit tight. And if there is something difficult that is happening in real time, it is your job to raise it, but it may not be your job to do the confrontation. So I would respect the chain of command. You can always take solace when you're a PA that you are making pennies upon the thousands of dollars that are being made to the people above you. Go make them earn it. Don't be afraid of that.
I love that answer. So you raise the issue, but don't necessarily press it if it's not your. I
call it the responsibility football. If I've seen a problem, and no one is there to fix it, then the responsibility football is mine. Now, if someone else is more fitting to fix it or should deal with it, or it's in their realm, I hand them the responsibility football, and they take it and they sort it. And that's the chain. It is a clear handing off of, I see this needs to get sorted. This is your task. This is my expectation of when you're going to turn it around. Let me know if you need anything to accomplish it. And I think that's the process. However high it needs to go. Trust me, I've gone begging at the highest levels to get something sorted, only to have those people go, "What do you want me to do, Rich?" I once said to a producer, I'd like you to go tell him this. That's what I'd like you to do. Can't do it. There's a massive amount of politics, egos, a lot of money, a lot of things under the surface that we certainly don't know 100% of. So trust the chain of command, I think, is a decent bit of advice.
That's such good advice. I appreciate that, because I think sometimes early on you might not know that there is that chain of command, but also that, you don't have to take on all the burden. But like you said, everybody's got, they have somebody they're answering to. So even
Correct.
Ridley Scott, Andrew Stanton, David Fincher, they have to answer to someone. And so, just making sure people are safe, things are getting done well. I think that's the biggest thing. I mean, what we just saw, go down in New Mexico, to me, that looked like a chain of command issue and that's why it's so important, because people can lose their lives if you're not following the chain of command.
It's terrible. When Sarah got run off the tracks a few years back, I worked with Sarah on Carter. I remember her working the slate on it. And at the end, we treat filmmaking and motion pictures like it's almost outside of reality.
Yeah.
But what recently happened on the set of Rust, that nothing can be more real than that.
Yeah.
So I try to tell people, before I actually went to the academy, I worked in the city. I worked with HIV patients, hospice patients. Used to manage their pain cocktails. So I had seen real life.
Yeah.
So when I had got to the film industry, a lot of those egos and unrealistic expectations, I was a little bit older. I had seen a little bit more. I had my values in place. And I think that when you're coming up, establish those values early, what you hold dear, what's important to you, what type of person you want to be, and everything will end up circling back to that, and it won't lead you astray.
Yeah, agreed. Well, Richard, what an amazing morning. I just appreciate all of the wisdom drops that you gave us and
It
taking
was
us
really
on
fun.
the journey with you. And just kind of, I hope that everybody that was here and is still here, that this helped you and this gave you guys some perspective, but also that we all start somewhere, and usually we start coming off the stage and not knowing anybody. And it can
That's
happen.
okay.
Yeah, and that's okay. But remember too, the folks that you're in classes with, they're your crew. They're the people you're going to keep continuing working with as you guys are growing into the industry. So but yeah, Richard, thank you so much. And I'm so looking forward to our future with Halon. I actually think I'm having a meeting with your crew on Monday
Oh,
to
awesome.
kind of really start seeing how we can connect more.
Awesome. I do have one more bit that I think
Yes,
is
please.
important. I think
Yes,
it's
please.
important. It's I think one of the things that I'm most proud of, and I'd be remiss if I didn't mention it here. So here at Halon, I've told you about my backstory. I had a sleeping bag in my office. I slept with an iPhone in my hand for years. So I was very conscious of the work-life balance. I wanted
Yeah.
to be able to pursue my dreams, but also have a personal life, a more fulfilling, full life. And a lot of times, working in the motion pictures won't allow you to do that. We all know that visual effects has been famous for exploiting labor, 10, 12, 14, 16 hours a day, being trapped there at the whims of editorial directors, creatives, the studio. We're really proud at Halon Entertainment that we mandate an 8-hour day. People work 9 to 6, you get an hour lunch, you work OT, you get paid for it. We hire staff, we don't hire per show. So if you have the talent, it can be somewhere you can grow, and it can be somewhere that balance for that work-life balance is really valued. We take a lot of pride, myself personally, considering where I've been and what I went through. It's very fulfilling to be able to reach back out, particularly to the Academy crowd, and say it doesn't have to be that way. We can treat you more fair along, California work practices or wherever you may be around the world. So I think it's worth mentioning because it wasn't always like this.
I appreciate that because that was my reality as well. And even if you remember, oh no, maybe not. That's the 80s. I started in production when we had pagers and payphones. And I had
How did
that
they do it?
pager
You
literally.
wonder how they did it. I remember when I was at Sony, and the president of production had in his office a picture of production of Lawrence of Arabia, and they are in the middle of the desert with gear out there shooting in this little speck of sand in this massive desert. It just boggles my mind that they ever got anything done in those days.
Yeah, it was the intense forethought and planning. I think when you have kind of all these other things, it's easy to kind of forget things or have the last minute things. But back then it would be like, we're on set. We're not, there's no, there's no one to go and get the wig.
James will not
no
shoot
one
that
can
scene
go
today.
find the iPhone.
That's right.
But thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Can't wait to have you back again as well. And you have a fantastic day.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you, everyone.
All right. Thank you, guys.